Hi, my name is Britt Gilman and I'm the Research Project Analyst at the Deep River Public Library. Since 2022, the Deep River Library and partners have been co-leading this local history project titled Not Born from a Virgin Forest, Deep River and Area's Earliest History. The title of this project is derived from early recorded accounts of Virginia Adams Hunt, who proposed that the area that we now call Deep River had housed families for decades prior to the arrival of the town, and therefore Deep River was not born from a virgin forest. This project was started in response to requests to expand understanding of life in our area prior to 1945. I'd like to thank our partners, the Schoolhouse Museum, the Laurentian Hills Library, Professor Stephanie Adams, Alex Stevens of Deep Tech, the Deep River District Community Foundation, and to the New Horizons for Seniors grant, who generously funded this project and made our work possible. Enjoy. Hello everyone. Thanks for making it out tonight. My name is Britt and I'm the Project Research Analyst here at the library. Since September of last year, the library has been embarking on a local history project titled Not Born from a Virgin Forest. Thanks to a generous grant from the New Horizons for Seniors project, we have been able to organize public events such as the one you're at tonight. I'd like to start us off with a land acknowledgement. We are gathering today on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. We honor their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory, and we uphold and uplift the voices and values of our host nation. We acknowledge the historical oppression of lands, cultures, and the original peoples in what we now know as Canada. And we fervently believe that community gatherings like today are an important tool to contribute to the healing and the decolonizing journey that we all share together. So tonight I'm excited that we'll be joined by our local registered herbalist, Katie Wolk, for Plants, People, and Place. Since the plants around us have been in a reciprocal relationship with us since Earth began, I'm looking forward to learning about how plants have long been a part of our history and can continue to be our future. Katie grew up in Toronto, escaping to the forests and ravines wherever she could. Her first introduction to plants was at a nature-based day camp when she was just 11 years old. And she learned about the plants horsetail, pineapple weed, and purple loosestrife. She was hooked. After graduating university, she began her formal herbal medicine training at the Living Earth School in 2008, and became a registered herbalist with the Ontario Herbalist Association in 2019. During that time, she also became a registered massage therapist, and the two professions allow her to provide both stress and pain relief from the inside and out. So welcome, Katie, and come on up.
Thank you so much, Britt, for your lovely words and introduction. So what I'm going to be talking about today are plants that we see growing all around us. Some of them are native to this area and to Ontario and Canada in general, and some of them are naturalized here. So people brought them over from typically Europe, where they were used as medicine and food and other purposes, which I will get into. And I wanted to thank the library for inviting me here, and Britt for inviting me, and for all of you for taking time out of a lovely summer evening to spend time with me and the plants. So what I learned was Western herbal medicine, which is based in like North and Western Europe. Typically with like a Greek background, and so that's like compared to certain herbalists that are, you'll hear about TCM, which is like a traditional Chinese medicine. There's Kampo medicine in Japan, Ayurvedic medicine. So there's been herbal medicine in all different parts of the world since the beginning of time and people and plants. But what I learned about was Western herbal medicine. So I'll talk briefly about, just because I don't want to jump right into plants and then you're thinking all along the way, well, what do I do with these plants once I gather them? So depending on what you want to do with the plants, you can use them for internal purposes. So that's syrups, teas, decoctions, tinctures, and vinegars. Or you can use them externally on your skin topically. So compresses, poultices, salves, and infused oils. So a syrup is basically, you would take a plant and put it in water and add sugar and boil it down to simmer it down so that what you have is half the amount of water and a lot of sugar. And people use honey as well. And then you would keep it in the fridge after you strain out the herb. That can be useful for coughs and colds and things, but the shelf life in the fridge could be about a month. So you kind of have to have things on hand and know you're going to prepare for cold and flu season. Make it, put it in the fridge, and it's good for 1 month. Teas, you can use fresh plant or dried plant. So you could go into your garden and harvest peppermint, lemon balm, all the plants that I'm going to be talking about. And then you would just make a tea like you would normally. So, but if it's like fresh leaf, you obviously have to, strain it through so you don't end up with like a lot of leaf in your cup. Decoctions are the same as a tea. The difference is that with a tea, you're harvesting, you're using like the leaf and the flower. If you want to use the bark, the berry, the seed, anything with like a harder cell wall, you have to break it down. You can't just put it into a teapot, add water, wait 7 minutes, even 20 minutes. You're not going to get all the medicine. So to break down that cell wall with a decoction, you have to boil it on the stove, put a lid on it, turn it down to a simmer it for like 20 minutes. Some people do longer, like 40, 45 minutes, and then you end up with the medicinal tea. A tincture, I'm going to have to probably do a whole other workshop on tinctures alone. A tincture, I actually have some tinctures for you to taste. I'm not going to bring it around right now, but it's an alcoholic extract that gets the both water-soluble and alcohol-soluble constituents out of a plant, and that has the longest shelf life. I'll backtrack a little bit to the teas. If you harvest your garden plants and dry them, you can store them for a long time in a cool, dark, dry place, and then you can use them for like 1 to 3 years. They're not going to go bad, they're just going to go a little bit stale. A tincture you can have sitting on a shelf, not even in the fridge, sitting on a shelf because of the alcohol content. You can have it for like 10 years with the plant material still in. Once you press out the plant material and just keep the liquid, you have about 1 to 5 years depending on the plant. Am I losing anyone right now? Okay. And a vinegar is like a tincture, but for different reasons. If people don't want to use alcohol, cultural, religious, whatever reason, you could make a vinegar tincture. So they're just as good, maybe not as potent as a tincture with alcohol, and the shelf life is shorter. And I'm just going to step over here, and this is what I use to dry my plants. So I have some drying on here now. I just got these at like the Whistle Stop, these straw little baskety plates. And then, yeah, it keeps going forever. and then I have it hanging on a hook. So what's good about this method is there's airflow coming from underneath and the top, so things can really dry well. You want to do as like single layered as possible, just so things don't get mushed in the middle and mold can happen. That works for me. I don't harvest a ton of stuff. The teas that I do make tea blends, but I buy my plants already dried from an organic source. So I do kind of minimal drying, but that's one method. Another way you can do it is like have like a big kind of, like not a food dehydrator, but something of that size, and have screens and a fan going down below, so there's airflow and it's dark, and like let's say a wood box. As long as it's on a screen, there's good airflow. For like a handful of herbs, you can also put them single layer in a brown paper bag and just tuck it away and just check on it every couple of days or every week and just make sure everything's drying nicely. There was a question over here. Yeah.
I was going to ask about the dehydrator, because I've read about how sometimes if it's too hot, it could remove the beneficial properties. Is that something?
Yeah, like you definitely, I don't know what temperature a food dehydrator would go to, but you definitely don't want it to be too high because it will kill some of the medicines in the plant. Some people like even just like will dry things in the oven at a very low temperature too. So
Is that an acceptable method?
I haven't done it. I just like as minimal as possible with like little intervention, but I'm sure there are people that, you know, find that more convenient. Yeah, I don't know if there's been studies or anything done on the quality afterwards. That's a good question. Mm-hmm. Question in the back.
I didn't put them in my car.
Yeah, that'll work too. Although then you're getting a lot of light, right?
No, I put it in under, put the card in under, it just gets hot.
Okay. Interesting. So that is internal ways to get plants into you. Any questions before I move on to the external? So the topical ways we can use plants, compresses, so that's what's going on up here. It's just making a tea, and when the temperature is just like still hot but tolerable, you dip a gauze or a cloth or whatever you have into the tea, and you put it on a sore muscle, a wound, whatever you have going on, a broken bone. So like comfrey would be good for that, for example. I'm not talking about that later, so I think I can just say comfrey right now and not ruin any surprises. Poultices are really fun if you're out and about and need first aid when you're like on a hike and you don't really, you didn't bring your pots and pans and camping stove, and so you can just chew up a plant. So you're breaking down the cell wall and then just stick it on to a wound. If it's like a big wound, you don't want to chew it up tiny so that little bits of plant can get lodged in the wound, but a lot of plants do have antimicrobial properties that can disinfect on the spot until you can do other first aid later on. It's also good, not just wounds, but like bee stings and little scrapes and cuts, and if you're touching stinging nettle by accident and it hurts like a bee sting, you just find the appropriate plants, chew them up, put them on, and they're really cooling. Salves, that's like a harder ointment, so it's something you can keep in a jar, have on hand for years, really. So it's just a mixture. Well, we're going to get into it later, so I don't need to go in too much depth now, but basically it's a mixture of herbal, like a herb-infused oil, heated with beeswax and you can add essential oils for other properties you want to introduce, and some nice scent as well, or just leave it as is, and then you just, as it's still liquid, like the oil and the beeswax melt together, and then you just pour that into a container, and it hardens because the beeswax, when it gets back to room temperature, will harden, and then you have a salve. So that's what this is. And then infused oils, instead of making a salve, you could just leave the oil as is with the plant strained out and use the oil on your body for like massages or massages. Any questions about that? So this breaks down a little bit of appropriate parts of the plants to use for different methods. So the flower and leaf can be done with tincture, tea, syrup, vinegar, compress, poultice, salve, and oil. And harder material like root, bark, berry, and seed, you need to do the decoction, which is the boiling method on the stove to make a tea, tinctures, and syrup. And resins, so like pine resin, balsam fir resin, that is soluble in oil. So, and some of them are also soluble in alcohol, so you could do a tincture with a resin, a salve, or a poultice. So one of my favorite resin poultices is balsam fir because it's so accessible. I don't have a picture of the balsam fir, but we have it all over the place, and in the summertime, the trunk of the tree has these like little blistery pockets, and it's super sticky, but if you want to smell something nice, you just poke a blister, and then the resin shoots out onto your finger, and you can use that in first aid as an antiseptic. And also, it's like really sticky, so you're going to be sticky for a while, but it does help to like adhere skin together if you're finding yourself with like, I don't know, like I've heard a story where someone was out like chainsawing in the woods and sawed their finger almost completely off, and then they found some balsam fir and stuck the resin on, put the finger together, and then when they got to the hospital, they were able to save the finger. So, powerful stuff. The timing of harvesting, the leaf and flower, each plant will have its own specific time, so different flowers bloom at various times of the summer. So generally at the beginning of the flowering period is when all the medicine and the potency is moving upwards into the flowers and the leaves. And you want to harvest, like different plants will have different kind of like harvestable areas. So like you can tell if you have gone too far, if you like taste down to like the middle of the stem and there's no more like taste anymore, like there is with the tips and the leaves and the flowers. When it loses its taste, it's losing its medicine as well. So make sure that what you're harvesting smells good and tastes good. Obviously, make sure that you know the plant that you're harvesting before you taste it and smush it all up. And then the root, generally, you want to harvest it in the fall once the aerial parts have died back. The aerial parts are anything above ground, the leaves and stuff. When the aerial parts have died back and the energy is now flowing into the roots, and the medicine is being stored there for the winter. Something I read recently that I found really interesting is that with some plants, traditionally the root has always been used, but it's because It's easier to transport for a long time across continents, so people would bring the root back from place to place, but like the leaf and flower doesn't last as vibrantly for too long. And so, but in some cases, the leaf and flower have almost the same qualities and medicines as the root. And the added benefit of using the leaf and flower is that you can let the root survive in the ground to produce more of the same plant the next year. So it's a bit more sustainable if you can to just use the aerial parts and not dig up the root. I mean, some plants like are biennial, so they only last for 2 years, and in those cases it's fine to harvest a second year root. But for a first year root, you kind of want to let it do its thing. I'm just going to grab a water. Any questions so far? Yeah.
What you were saying about the roots and the leaf, I was actually thinking about echinacea, about how typically echinacea is harvested from the root. Is this like a common misconception kind of thing? Where the flowers and leaves are just as good, or that's different? Like it depends on the plant?
Yeah, like I am going to talk about echinacea later, but it's definitely, you can use the flower and the leaves of echinacea. Yeah. So it's not that, I guess in some ways it is a misconception that you have to use the root, but in some cases it has a different medicine than the leaf and flower. So it kind of depends on the purpose of using the plant. So most of what I learned about foraging in wild spaces has come from like a traditional, like indigenous North American cultural perspective, I would say. I was never really taught like how Europeans would have harvested plants back in the day. Like there's no, as far as I know, record of like having that same like reciprocity that I learned about harvesting when I was in herb school. So there's a lot of things to consider when harvesting in a wild space. So first of all, like I said earlier, you definitely want to make sure you have the right plant. There are some lookalikes. Balsam fir can look like a yew tree, Y-E-W, which is toxic. What else looks alike? All of them kind of look the same when you're first learning about plants. It's only when you start to know them that you're like, oh, that's obviously that, and that's obviously that. So, I mean, there's so many apps now. Like, I feel old saying this, but back when I was in school, there were no apps. You couldn't just pick out your phone and take a picture in like PlantNet or like Google Lens. So we would walk around with those two books. These are the two main ones that work well together if you wanted to get into like old-timey time bookie learning. So Newcomb's Wildflower Guide. It's all about IDing and making sure like you look at different characteristics, like do the leaves grow opposite or do they grow alternate? The color of the flowers, how many petals per flower head, and then it takes you to the page and they're like, this is what we think it is. And it doesn't tell you anything about the medicine, but it does tell you that you definitely have the right plant. So that is Newcomb's Wildflower Guide, which is very useful when the plant is in flower. And then once you have that down, Peterson Field Guide, Eastern and Central Medicinal Plants and Herbs. This has the medicinal uses of the plants. So those two together work well. Potency. I'm drawing such a blank right now. So the potency, yes. I forage in wild spaces. Well, I don't have a garden. I have an apartment, so I don't have my own garden space. But I've always, even when I had a garden, I would still harvest in the wild when I could, because the plants that are in the wild are the survivors. And so they have more medicinal properties typically than a plant that has been cared for and like weeded around. They haven't had to fight for survival. All that fight for survival is like they'll have more medicinal constituents, like maybe more volatile oils, maybe more antibacterial properties because they've had to fight off different pests. So the wild ones are the survivors. The medicine will be stronger. Another thing to always keep in mind is to harvest ethically. So like what you see isn't what you should be taking. You should only harvest what you actually need, because someone else might also be harvesting in the same space. And actually, if you do notice that like there are things that are kind of like look like they've been cut or chopped or whatever, I would leave it alone and go to somewhere else that hasn't been harvested. The idea is, you want to leave, let's say you do come across a huge patch of, I don't know, echinacea. You only want to take like 10% of what's there if you're harvesting the root, and only 20% if it's the leaf and flower that you're taking. So you want to take that and leave 90%, you know, so like you're not wiping out an entire population of a species. And then you can come back to that, you know, like maybe not year after year, but once every 3 years, go back to that spot. Some things I don't need to harvest every year because I haven't gone through my supply. So I just, even though I see the plant and it's like perfect to harvest, I just leave it if I don't need it. Timing, you have to kind of go by the weather. So if it's been raining for 2 days straight, on that third day, the plants are going to be a little bit too like oversaturated with water. You want to have like 2 good sunny days in a row and harvest the plant once the dew has dissipated. So like 10:30 a.m., 11 a.m. is ideally the typical time of day to harvest. Be mindful of where you're harvesting from. If there's like environmental concerns, like if you are harvesting along like a waterway and you see a beaver dam, don't harvest that. If you're in like a toxic environment, if you're at the side of a highway with lots of salt and road pollution, don't harvest from there. You want to stay about 100 meters back from any gravel road. Yeah, just environmental concerns so that you're harvesting good, clean sources of plants. And then all of that is to basically ensure the sustainability of the plant population that you are taking. Any questions there? Oh yeah. So for personal use, I think you would probably not need more than a cup or like 250 mils of a tincture. So just like a cup will probably last you a long time. If you're just starting out and you're treating yourself or like a family of like 4, it's probably a good start. You don't need to have enough for a liter right away. So these are the plants that I'm going to be talking about. I'm not going to go like in too much depth because it's like just plant after plant after plant of information, but I'll do the highlights. And if you have any questions along the way, let me know. So the ones that are starred have naturalized in North America, and the other ones are native to Ontario and this area. And I did have permission from my herbal teacher to post his calculations. So I'm looking at the 250 ml column, and I've only ever done the 1 to 5 fresh or the 1 to 7 dry. So the 1 to 5 fresh, 250 mils, you only need 45 grams of the plant. And then you would chop it up small, put it in your 250 ml jar, add your alcohol, and you're good to go. So how do you know if you've had 45 grams? Because like you're going to be out in the woods and you're going to be harvesting, and then come back and you're like, I only have 38 grams. So I always harvest a little bit more weight than I need. Just like if I were to need 45 grams, I might go to 60 grams because you will lose some water content on the way, and you're always weighing. So I even brought a little bag, but you guys know what a plastic bag looks like. So this is a pen scale. So I take this out harvesting with me. I have a bag that I have a lot of my harvesting stuff in. So this twists around, and when you have your bag here, twisting that, you can find the zero. So first you have to zero this, and then when you're harvesting into the plastic bag, and then the weight brings the weight down. And then roughly when you have 60 grams, I would stop there. So this is a really great tool to have. And then you want to process it like right away when you get home, because if you wait a couple days, you're going to find that the 45 grams is now like 28 grams or maybe a little bit more, but you're going to lose water and water. Like there's a really big weight difference between a fresh and a dried plant. And then if you were to buy or dry your plants first and then make your tincture, then you would just go with the 1 to 7 dry, 34 grams. And so your alcohol that you use for a tincture, if you're not doing a vinegar and you want to do a tincture, 40% vodka is totally fine for starting out. Ground ivy. I think it's my favorite. Don't tell the others, but I think ground ivy is my favorite plant. So this is some old footage of me making a tincture. So I wanted to like walk you through the process a little bit. So that's freshly harvested ground ivy. That's called a Mezzaluna knife. You hold it with 2 hands and you just walk it along the cutting board, and makes it really quick and easy to make a tincture. We cut it up so that more cell wall of the plant is open for the medicinal constituents to get out into the alcohol. And once it's in little pieces, you put it into your jar. And then that's my alcohol solution, which is a mixture of water, alcohol, and glycerin. I buy like 95% alcohol, and then I dilute it down to like 30%. There's 60% water and 10% glycerin. And the glycerin helps to mitigate like the harshness of the alcohol, and kind of helps with the flavor, and just it's not as burning to the mouth. If you take straight alcohol, it's pretty hot and irritating. And then it also gets like any like fat constituents out, like fat soluble constituents. It's a well-rounded menstruum. And my herbal teacher is pretty unique in the way that he makes his alcohol menstruum. Other herbalists will do like a calculation. So like if it's for ground ivy, we need 60% alcohol, and for this plant, we need 90%. And they just, I never learned that, and so it's really complicated, and I like this method. But when I go to conferences and learn from other herbalists, it kind of like doesn't make sense. I get the concept. Oh yeah, and if you don't label your stuff, you're not gonna know what it is ever again. Like you think you're gonna make one tincture, and then you're like, oh, I'm always gonna know that's ground ivy. But like in 5 years, when you come across this jar, it could be peppermint, you have no idea. So, and also when you're going through the process of like making things, like I write down as I'm working, because if I don't write it down, it's like it never happened. Like if I'm weighing something, I'm like, oh, I put like 300 grams of that, and if you don't write it down, it just, you don't know exactly what's in there, and if it works well, you'll never be able to recreate it again. So when you're labeling, I use the Latin name, so it's Glaucoma hederaceae, and that's just the short form. 1 to 5 tincture, so I know that it was fresh plant that I used. You always want to date it with the year, because the years go by. And then on the far left, I like to write where I harvested it from, just like when I'm pressing it out. I don't know, something like it's nice to remember where you were at the time. And when you're harvesting, there's always something that's going on. Like, oh, I remember I was like fighting with the bees that time, and like there were bees all around, but it was so peaceful. So that's that. So Glaucoma hederaceae, that's the Latin name, and it's really nice to learn the Latin names of plants because there are a lot of common names. So creeping jenny, for example, can sometimes be used with a whole different plant. So when you're talking to someone and they're like, oh, I have this plant, and you're like, oh, I know that plant, and then it's a totally different plant. So especially when you're learning about harvesting and the medicines for internal use, you definitely want to know that you have the exact plant and species that you think you're getting. So Glaucoma hederaceae, it's not from here. It was actually brought over on purpose. Some things I wonder, like, did they bring it over on purpose, or just like, did the seeds get stuck on the boat or whatever? But I think this was definitely brought over because it was in people's gardens, and it was used in the brewing of beer and ale before hops was used in beer brewing. So it was the English and what is now Germany would use ground ivy to make beer flavoring, like to add to their beer flavoring before hops. And it's good for inflammation, pain and spasms of the digestive tract, runny nose, colds, fevers, antidepressant, anti-inflammatory, stomach ulcers, helps with anxiety, and tinnitus, which I learned about in the last couple of years. And that would be as a tincture for the tinnitus. And it's in the mint family, so when you like rub the leaf and smell it, it has a really nice, not like peppermint, but there's some nice smell to it. And maybe now is a good time. I have some in tincture forms, so I'm gonna pass it around if you want to try some. I'm gonna put a drop on your hand. So if you go like that with your hand and bring your thumb up a little bit, you'll make a little bowl in your hand. I'm gonna put one drop there, and then you just like try it. It's okay.
I'm gonna take your word for the bowl.
Okay, so can you go up a little? That's okay. Everybody got one that wanted one? So someone asked me a great question. What is a dose? What's a normal dose? That was like not close to a dose. So if you're starting out with a new herb for the first time, especially if you're new at taking tinctures, you would start with, so this is 1 dropper is when you squeeze the bulb once and you get that much. That's 1 dropper. And you would start with 2 droppers 3 times a day, working your way up to 3 to 4 droppers 3 times a day. That's for a chronic condition, something you've had for a long time. If it's an acute situation where you're coming down with a sore throat for the first time, like, first day of a sore throat, and you're like, oh no, I'm getting sick, 6 to 8 droppers. So 6 to 8 of those, 6 to 8 times a day. Does anybody have this in their garden or on their lawn? I'm sure a lot of people have it on their lawn and don't know because you mow it. But if you didn't mow your lawn for a little bit of time, you might see these cool purple flowers start to show. And they can get like that tall. And it's a very useful plant. I think it looks pretty. I was doing a walk on someone's property recently, and I was just looking for things to harvest, and she has like a huge acreage, and she showed me this like kind of section just past her horse stable, and so she's like, oh, I'm getting rid of all this, and I was like, oh my God! Like, she must have thought I was crazy. I was just so happy to see ground ivy, and she was like, take as much as you want, and I couldn't take everything because I didn't need that much, but like, yeah, I definitely got a liter's worth that day. Yeah. Pine. I can talk forever about pine. So white pine, we can use the needles for tea, really high in vitamin C. That's not the best picture of the resin. So sometimes like you'll see in the winter time or the fall, that's when I see it most often, is like some sap or the resin sticking out of like a spot where a limb had fallen off or some kind of a wound was done to the tree. And it's really sticky to harvest. But alcohol will get it off your hands, and so will olive oil or any kind of cooking oil. So another herbalist that I know said like she just like pats her sticky fingers on her like fleece and wool clothes, and then her hands get all fuzzy, but then she's not sticky anymore. Yeah?
Baking soda.
Oh.
That'll help get rid of a lot of it.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. And everyone knows the pollen. That is medicinal too, and super expensive to buy on Amazon. So we can collect what do I talk about first? We can collect the pollen by holding up a little bag and like tapping on the catkin, and then the pollen releases. Or, where is it? Or you can collect the whole catkin and make a tincture. So there's some pine needle in there because that's good too. And then when I shake it up, you can see that it's cloudy with pine pollen. And pine pollen is really amazing. On its own, just dried, You can add it to foods. You can have it like sitting in a jar and just add it to foods. Question?
Sorry, what was that word you just said?
Catkin.
What's that?
So it's part of the plant that that produces the pollen. So it's the male part of the pine.
Are those not, I don't know, are those not just baby pine cones? No, there's something else.
No, that's the catkin, and then the pine cones are the female parts.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
Wind.
that's what it looks like before it lets all that yellow stuff out, right?
Yeah, and then the
what happens to
wind.
those? They dry up and fall down?
Yeah, they turn like orangey brown, and then they dry up and fall down. Like all those little pieces, when they're brown, they fall all over the
And
place.
those aren't pine cones, they're the,
Catkins.
oh.
Yeah.
So Katie,
Yeah.
they have fallen, are they not any good anymore for medicinal?
No, it's past. Yeah.
So what is the sort of best time of the year to go up and find them?
About a month ago.
So June?
Early June. It depends. Like sometimes things change depending on the weather. But when you start to see that, you know it's pollen time. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I have one more question. These are not unique to white pine. All the pine trees have these, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
need to know that you're dealing with a white pine before you
Oh,
start.
yeah, that's a good point. So, do you see these nodes? Like there's one there, and just like where all the needles come from. When there's 5 coming from one single node, WHITE, white pine.
So only white pine will have 5
That's right, and red
needles
pine
coming
has
from
five.
a single node.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and then the red pines have 2.
So if I go to my big pine tree and there's 5 needles coming from a single node, I know it makes those things. That's what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's everywhere here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that is really good for like adrenals. So the adrenal glands are our stress hormone glands. So that's a way to like calm down our adrenal stress in our body. It also balances out testosterone for men. It gives us energy. Really good stuff with pine. And no, I can't. There's too much. I want to say so much. So it's antibacterial. Well, it's a whole link between pine trees and fires, and how like pine trees, especially the jack pine, really benefits from forest fires and actually can like help to get fires going to their benefit. So that's something to look into in your spare time. It's antibacterial. That would be like all parts of the pine tree. It helps with arthritis, spasming in the digestive tract, and the respiratory respiratory organs. So if someone has asthma, this is a really good, as a tea, as a tincture, it really helps with the asthma. Antiviral, good for the liver, helps to stop bleeding. So the resin would be the most ideal way to use that as a way to stop bleeding, both internally. Internally, the needles and the pollen, but externally for sure the resin. Oh, pine is like very astringent, so that means it's very drying to our tissues. So it can be to the point that it's like way too irritating to take on a regular basis, but if you combine it with another herb as a tincture, licorice root or marshmallow root or New England aster, which we'll talk about, those 3 herbs all are they all have a demulcent property, so that is like a mucilaginous, like gooey sort of texture, so that helps take away the astringency from pine. Another nice way to you can deal with the astringency is to make a pine tincture, and then when you're sick, combine it with honey and just eat it like a cough syrup. So just like kind of form a paste in a bowl with pine tincture and a bit of honey to get the consistency you like, and then just eat that. And the honey has that demulcent, mucilaginous texture, so that'll help. Are we good? Echinacea. So there's Echinacea purpurea and Echinacea angustifolia. I'll talk about the purpurea. It's the more commonly planted one, I believe. It's also called purple coneflower, and it is native to this area. So if you do plant it, it will thrive, as long as your soil is where it's happy. And that's what the root looks like. The other Echinacea has more of just like a rootlet, not like a main taproot. It's just like more of a rootlet situation. And we can use the flowers and leaves instead of the root if we want.
Is it a perennial or a biannual, or what is the echinacea?
I believe it's a biennial, so it'll grow for 2 years. So it would be more appropriate to, if you're going to do the root, wait till the fall of its second year.
Okay.
Yeah. You're welcome. This is a good one to take if you're starting to get sick. So some people take it every day in like not a 3-dropper per dose, but like a 1 to 2-dropper per dose every day to just ward off any cold or flus during cold and flu season. Has anybody seen this one around? We have a ton. It grows along the edge of forests and in forests. And if you smell the leaves, it looks like a fern, but it's not a true fern. If you rub the leaves and then smell your fingers, they're really pleasant, sweet, earthy. I can't describe it, but it's so nice. Try it next time you see one. It's really lovely, and it's one of the best ways to deal with poison ivy. So we're lucky to have so much around. You can also drink it as a tea. It's like, it'll help you sleep really well. Yeah. So you can just take off, like a little handful of leaves. It's good to have the right tools if you're going out with the intention to harvest. Like you don't just want to like yank on the plant and get what you get. You want to like intentionally like snip it off with a sharp knife or sharp scissors so that the plant isn't as traumatized. Yeah. This is another sweet one that we have. I don't know if that's the best picture to show, but it grows along the edges of waterways. It's down at our beaches. It grows in like a big shrub clump. And it's called sweet gale. Well, it's called many things. I call it sweet gale. That was also used in like as a flavoring agent for brewing beer. You were right about that, Christine. I learned about that recently. Remember I showed it to you and you smelled it and you were like, that would be good as a beer. You were totally right. Sorry to point you out like that, but you were right. Yeah, it was used until the 16th century in Northern and Western Europe as a flavoring for beer, and also included in soap recipes, and also useful as an insect repellent. So when I make my bug spray, I actually use yarrow tincture as part of the recipe. But now I'm thinking I might give sweet gale a try and just see what it does. Any questions about sweet gale? We're actually really lucky to have this. Like when I was in Toronto, I was used to the plants that grew down there, and then I came up here and like I never had sweet fern or sweet gale, so I learned about them once I got here, and like we're so lucky to have those plants here. We have a lot.
Did you use the leaves for the insect repellent?
Yeah, they smell really nice. They leave a bit of like a yellow sticky residue on your fingers. It's lovely, it lasts for a long time. Not as sticky as pine resin. Like it just feels like a little bit sticky, but not like your fingers can't pry apart, yeah. So you'll find that, I've only seen it near water. Oxeye daisy, it's everywhere right now. You can harvest it if you have it. And it's a great herb to have on hand. Like you'll want to harvest it now and make a tincture, because come the fall, if you have kids or even if you get a fever, it's amazing at lowering fevers. And the leaves, to me, are pretty unique. I didn't take a picture of them, but you'll see the leaves, and you can pick one off and eat them. And it has like a nice, like spicy aftertaste. So you can definitely throw that into salads. And it's the flower. I would pick the flower and like 1 or 2 leaves when I harvest this plant for making a tincture. Then you get the leaf goodness and the flower goodness. And it's the whole flower head. You don't have to like pick off individual petals. You have to do that only if you're making dandelion mead. And it takes forever. I'll never do it again. Violets, that's a springtime. That's one of the first herbs that pop up in the springtime. You can eat the flowers. You can add them to salads, omelets, anything you want to eat. And this one is actually, there's a lot of research going on about this one and how it's helping cancer. Specifically lungs, liver, spleen, and breast cancer. It helps to take away the pain associated with the cancer. It's anti-neoplastic, which means anti-cancer. So either if you want to prevent cancer or you have it, this is a good one to include. It helps with arthritis. It's a good liver and detoxifying plant. One of the first times I was introduced to violets, it was infused in a vinegar. So you can definitely make a violet vinegar and use it for salad dressings and stuff, or as a vinegar tincture. And also, if you add honey to your vinegar tinctures, you get something called an oxymel, and that's a lovely way to take a vinegar product as well. And then if you add honey to a tincture, you get an elixir. That's another way to. Any questions about the violet? Yeah.
What should you not eat with the violet?
I think it's all good. Probably when the leaves get bigger, like once the flowers are gone and the leaves get bigger, I haven't tasted it, but I imagine they get a bit more bitter. But bitter's not bad. Bitter's actually helpful. We don't have enough bitter flavors in our diet. And bitter really helps with things like acid reflux and heartburn. Much to do with the stomach acid content and how the salivary glands communicate with our digestive enzymes in our stomach. It just helps to prepare our stomach for food coming in. So you would take a bitter herb 10 to 15 minutes before a meal on an empty stomach, and it takes away heartburn and acid reflux. So dandelion leaf is a really good bitter that's really accessible to everybody. Lots of bitters out there. This is one of our most ancient plants. It's called horsetail. There's a few different species, but Equisetum arvense, or field horsetail, common horsetail, is the one that grows near us. If you're walking along the marina pathway, you'll see it down by the marina. This is what it looks like in the spring, and it reproduces by spores, so it's a really different kind of a plant. It doesn't flower. And it has these like bamboo kind of sections. It's a really good urinary tract herb and lymphatic herb. It contains silica. If you have kidney diseases or like kidney failure, things like to do with like really severe kidney issues, that's not recommended because of the silica content. I did write something down. It's helpful with seizures, any kind of like kidney stone. I know I just said not with kidney stuff, but kidney stone isn't like a chronic thing. Arthritis, it also helps to stop bleeding. It's a good lymphatic herb to get our lymphatic system moving. They're about 250 million years old, and they used to be as tall as like a 30-meter tree. And it makes up much of our coal and oil deposits. So a lot of what we're getting as oil and coal came from the Equisetum plants, the bigger ones. Goldenrod. I know what you're thinking. You're not allergic to it. Oh, okay. So I think like people see goldenrod and they think it's ragweed, and I don't know why. Maybe they come into flower at about the same time. I have another picture. That's ragweed. Ragweed and goldenrod, but like my theory is that maybe there was like a Claritin or Reactin commercial back in the day that said like, are you bothered by hay fever? And then they showed poor innocent goldenrod. And everybody thought that that's what was what they were allergic to. But it's the pollen of the ragweed. So you'll see, it's a poor picture, sorry, but more clearly under there, that's it in flower. So you see the green from the top, but if you look underneath, there's all this yellow pollen, and that's what gets airborne, and that's what we're allergic to because it gets into our airways. It's not even like the ragweed plant itself, it's just that it's an irritating pollen, just like the pine pollen, and it's just like a airborne irritant. But ragweed is in and of itself is anti-allergenic. So if you take it, it helps with allergy symptoms, as does goldenrod. And I always get like happy, sad to see goldenrod because it means that it's like the end of summer. It's sort of like the last flower along with New England aster, and then you know it's like fall time. That's another good urinary tract herb, good for the lymphatic system, anti-allergenic. It makes a lovely tasting tea, and you don't need a whole lot. So there's not a big concern with over-harvesting because you wouldn't even need like a whole stalk to make tea.
Use the flowers and leaves for this? Or
Mostly the flower,
flowers?
yeah. And I have solidago species because there are like hundreds of different goldenrods, but all the species are interchangeable. There's like Canadian goldenrod, and I forget all the others, but they have the same makeup. Just looking for the time, because there's other things to do. New England aster, really good for colds and flus. as I mentioned before, it's like it has a demulcent quality. So when you make it into a tincture, it has like not the slimiest texture. Like marshmallow root would be the most slimy thing. But this is also nice to combine with something really astringent like pine to just take down that astringency. It helps with fevers, inflammatory conditions of the urinary tract. It's detoxifying. It balances out the female reproductive system. So if you have like irregular periods, painful cramps, things like that, PMS, it's good for that. Monarda, maybe I'll just take a small little break because I wanted to get you to taste, I'm not talking about rose, but I brought rose infused honey, which is really nice. I use dried rose petals because I don't grow my own fresh ones, but if you do have, outside of the library, they have a ton of fresh roses, but we can't harvest that. So if you want, you can all like stretch your legs and come on up to the table. I'll pass you a stick with a bit of honey and some dried rose petals on it. You can eat the rose petals. Because they're dry, they're a little bit tough, but totally edible. So come up for a stretch and a little snack. We're helping. No, it's not rose hip, it's rose petals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Here you go. Just put that right in your mouth. It's a bit drippy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I chose rose because it's just so flavorful, and that'll last like for years. Like over time, honey will crystallize, but all you have to do is put it in like some hot water on the stove on low heat, and it just mollifies, it liquefies again. And rose is so uplifting. It just like lifts the spirits, helps like anxiety, depression. It's very calming. It has vitamin C content. So like in the middle of winter when everything's dormant and there's no like nice smells, rose petal honey is a good one to go to.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Whenever you bring something to a boil, does that get rid of the vitamin C content of the plant?
Yeah, so I wouldn't bring that to a boil. I would just bring it warm enough. Probably like if your stove goes from like 1 to 8 or something, I would do like a 2, 3.
Okay.
If it's boiling, it's too much. And you just have to get it hot enough to the point that it's mollified or liquid again.
Okay.
So it's not a matter of getting it hot, it's just a matter of getting the sugar crystals away.
Okay, so like the rose petals or hips or anything that you make something with, never bring it to a boil, or you lose that vitamin C, correct?
You might not lose it, but it gets reduced.
Okay.
And honey specifically, like you want to get a raw unpasteurized because a lot of the good enzymes and antibacterial qualities of honey are reduced with the pasteurization process. But teas are a great way to get vitamin C out of a plant. Like if you're going for a tea, or if you're trying to get something out of a plant that's more nutritive, like that's vitamins and minerals, I would recommend a tea over a tincture because the alcohol will not extract or might, kill all of that over time. So there's so many things to think about when you're making a herbal prep. Like you have to think about the intention and what you really want from the plant, and shelf life too comes into play. Monarda fistulosa, sometimes you see it as red. That's a slightly different species. This one is bee balm or wild bergamot. And it's kind of used the same as you would oregano. It has really nice antimicrobial properties. So as a tea, It'll help with colds and fevers and things like that. Topically, just one of those good antimicrobial ones. And it can grow pretty tall. Red clover, that's one that's not from here, but it has, there's a lot of good things about red clover, but the main highlights are that it's good for, it has phytoestrogens, so it helps with menopause and just female reproductive hormone balancing throughout the life cycle. And again, you can use it as a tea or tincture. It has a bit of a sweet flavor if you chew on the little individual flower petals. That's what it looks like in the spring before it flowers. So it looks like a regular clover, but it has the white sort of chevron-y patterns, and then that's when you know it's going to be red clover, because the white clover doesn't have that. And recently, someone brought to my attention that red clover is believed to be toxic to horses, but it's not red clover itself. It's this black patch disease that red clover tends to get that's toxic to horses. So it's okay for horses as the plant, just not the fungus-infested red clover. Yarrow. Yarrow is another one of my favorite herbs. It's great for just everything. You can use it topically. It helps to stop bleeding. If you have a bleeding nose, you can just chew up the leaf and stick it in your nostril. It'll take away bleeding so fast. If you have a bad cut, you just chew on the leaf and put it on, put a Band-Aid around. It'll stop bleeding in 20 minutes. It's also the friendliest bitter that we have. So I might have done that backwards, but I should have given you yarrow first and then honey. So if anyone cannot tolerate the bitterness of the yarrow, you're welcome to come up for a second helping of honey. But it really is the gentlest but also very effective bitter that we have in herbal medicine. And when I do consultations with clients, and we sit down and talk for an hour and a half, however long it takes, and then I pick and choose plants and make a formula, usually a tincture formula for each person. And I usually include, if not yarrow, some other bitter to some degree, because it just helps the digestive system so much. And if that system isn't functioning optimally, there's no point in kind of moving forward with medicine, with herbal medicine, because everything gets assimilated through our digestive tract. So that's the first go-to. So bitters, even if it's just 10% of the formula, I add bitters. And yarrow is my go-to because it's gentle. One of the more mean bitters is wormwood. It's a really, really bitter plant, but it's also really effective against parasites and intestinal worms in children. It's also good for fevers. Any bitter is going to help to lower fevers. Who wants to try a bitter? Okay, I'll come around. Just hold out your hand if you want some. Same way with the semi-bowl. What was I just thinking of? It'll come back to me. So there's two things. So the first one I remembered, I meant to tell you about chamomile and how surprisingly bitter it is as a tincture. Yeah. And the other thing, I love walking around because people ask me questions and I was like, yeah, I should have said that, so thank you. There are garden varieties of yarrow that you'll see as pink. It's a different species, but I believe you can use them the same way. But this is more abundant. I find that like when I'm harvesting yarrow, it's at the edges of places. Oxeye daisy is like all over and it's like in the middle of the path, whereas you'll see yarrow kind of tucked in the shadows a little bit, out of the way. Yeah. Were there any other questions that I didn't answer that was asked when I was walking around? Oh yeah, I would harvest the leaf and the flower at the same time. And the dosage, sorry, there was a dosage question. I wouldn't take as much because it's bitter. So it would be in a formulation with other plants at like a 10 to at the most 20 range. If it's too bitter, it's a bit just too much, and like you won't take something if it doesn't taste good. So I try to make the formula taste as good as possible.
Sorry, you mean 10 to 20%, Katie?
Oh, what did I say?
Is it 10 to 20?
Oh, percent. Yeah. Yeah. Jewel weed, that grows in the same area as poison ivy. It really likes kind of damp, low forest, wet soil areas. And this is actually a really good antidote to poison ivy. So if you get a rash on you from poison ivy, you can just break off like part of the leaf. Well, take a leaf, but also the stem is more of a succulent stem. It's not woody. So succulent is like juicy, I guess. And so you can just squeeze the stem and get some of that stem juice out and rub it on the poison ivy rash, and it helps to take away the itch and the spread. But so for poison ivy, ideally, because it's a resin that's getting on your skin, you want to, as soon as possible after coming into contact with it, wash the area with soap and water and a washcloth to physically remove the resin, and then burn the washcloth. No. And then use a rubbing alcohol or some sort of alcohol on the area that came in contact, because alcohol will kill resin. Oh, and it's also called spotted touch-me-not. So the spotted and the jewel comes from when it gets rained on, it looks like little jewels on the leaf. And then the touch-me-not, when you see the flowers like that, there's a seed pod that hangs down. As soon as you touch that seed pod, it spits out its seeds. Pineapple weed is a fun one. It smells just like pineapple, and it grows probably at the edge of your driveway. It's everywhere. And it's a little plant, gets to be about that big. That's as showy as the flower gets. And it's in the same family as chamomile, as German chamomile, Matricaria. Roman chamomile is a different genus. And that's the bitter one that I was talking about. That is good for allergies. It's good for colds and flus, sore throats. It's antibacterial. You can even cut it and store it in your freezer, or you could dry it. But I've also stored it in my freezer and then just made fresh pineapple-y tasting. Tastes a bit more like chamomile as a tea, but it really does have a pineapple smell when you pick it up and rub the flower. It's tiny, that makes it seem like a big showy plant, but it's really this tiny, tiny, less than a centimeter flower. heal all, there's nothing that it can't do. It's really good for the digestive tract, our lymphatic system. It's great for skin healing. It's great on wounds. You can take a leaf, chew it up, put it on a cut if you're walking along a trail and get a cut on your toe, put it on. By the end of your walk, it'll be like as if nothing happened. It's amazing. And that's another one that pops up on everyone's, not everyone, on the front lawn a lot. So if you have some, you could like mow around it if you want, and like make a tincture, an infused oil, because it's great for skin. We're gonna be, I think, jumping into making something with Heal All. It's antimicrobial, antibacterial, antiviral. Okay, so I'll pause that there and do some demoing. It's going to be a Heal All salve. So I pre-measured everything, so it's like a cooking show over here. I'm making it look a lot easier, and it's like, oh, just take this jar. And so this is a double boiler. So the water is on the outside pot only. In the outside pot only, it's totally bone dry in here. When you're making anything with oil that's going to stay as an oil, you want 0 water to touch the oil, because oil mixed with water makes a moldy environment. So you don't want to fill this up too much with water, because when it gets hot, it's all gonna possibly, if it doesn't have a tight fit, it could spill over. If you don't have a double boiler, you could use a wider pot or a saucepan and use a Pyrex dish and put it in, and just make sure it's not boiling to the point where water's splashing inside. Yes. Just to be super hygienic, because you're all going to get some to take home. Yeah. So what I have now is the water's heating up. This is Heal All infused with olive oil. So there was plant material in the oil, and then it sat for a long time, and I pressed it out and measured out 3. So when you're measuring for like to make a salve, you want 1 part beeswax to 5 parts oil. So this is 350, oh, and it's measured. It's weighed, not measured. So it's all weighed in grams. And that's how you get the accurate measurements. So 350 grams of oil. It's olive oil infused with Heal All. And then I added some fractionated coconut oil. I hope no one's allergic to coconut. It's the MCT oil. I added it because it's shelf stable, and so is olive oil. And it's nice to get different properties, just like a variety of things when you're making a product. And I'm not doing essential oils because I didn't know if maybe there'd be like people with scent sensitivities in a small room, and then to take home something that you're not gonna be able to use wouldn't be helpful. So it's unscented. And this is 70 grams of beeswax. So it's these pellets that, so the idea is not to get the oil hot. The idea is to melt the beeswax. So it's just going to get hot enough until the beeswax is melted in, and then I'll turn off the heat. if you want, so it's easier to work with the beeswax beads for measuring accurately. If you have those big blocks of beeswax, you're constantly like chopping little bits off of a block and weighing it and then going back and taking more or putting less out. And one way you can get the beads is if you have like wax or parchment paper in one of those blocks, you can melt it in a double boiler by itself and then just sort of sprinkle it onto the wax paper and you can make your own beads. And then I have this glass stir stick just to move things along a little bit. So I like a 1 to 5 beeswax and oil ratio. It just makes a nice consistency. Not too hard and not runny and everything.
Katie, is your infusion with the oil also a 5 to 1 fresh and 7 to 1 dry?
Yeah.
And you don't heat it when you infuse it, you just put them together?
You could make like an infused oil that you can eat.
Like warm, mildly, not hot, but
You don't even have to warm it.
you don't have to.
No, you can just put the herbs in a jar, fill it with a food grade oil, and then keep it in a cold, dark place for 2 months, and then press it out and keep the oil in a dark jar is ideal for shelf stability, like shelf life stability, away from light, heat sources, in a cool area. Like there are other ways to make herbal oils. Mine's like the slow room temperature method, but some people do like heat up the oils and get things moving quicker, and then they're not waiting 2 months, they're just waiting 24 hours maybe.
Okay, and sorry, because I'm really enjoying this.
Oh, thank you.
If you use the oil, you could probably, all of the plants we have spoke about tonight, you could infuse all of those, just cold infusion in the oil, wait a couple of months and then you have that infusion.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and you can do that with vinegars, you know,
Oil,
oils.
you mix the oil and vinegar?
Yeah, I mean, not together, but like if you're making a salad dressing.
Yeah.
So there's a store in Pembroke called the Urban Gourmet, and you're just talking about that? So you can taste like all these infused balsamic vinegars like strawberry, and then combine it with like their basil infused olive oil. It's delicious, but they have all these different things you can sample and mix and match, and they have different recommendations. Yeah. Yeah. I use olive oil, so extra virgin olive oil is the best. Yeah. So I thought I had castor oil at home. I was hoping to use castor oil because it has a really thick property to it, like a thick texture, and it just feels really nice. But I'm gonna add some vitamin E to get that same thing. So I always keep a pin on my vitamin E bottles because I use my vitamin E for these things. So I just take a capsule, stick it with the pin, squeeze it into whatever I'm making, throw out the capsule, the empty capsule. So my vitamin E, what?
It thickens it?
Yeah, it thickens. So if you were to take vitamin E on your finger and put it on your lips, it feels amazing.
Katie, can you use avocado oil instead of?
Avocado? Yeah, it's just more expensive, but have at it.
Does it matter if the beeswax is pure or not?
Pure is better. Yeah, so like unrefined versus refined is better. It just means that there's been less, I guess that there's a boiling process and like a clarification that they do. I'm not too familiar with it. But like the more yellow, the better, typically.
Okay.
So you can buy,
Blocks that you can smell the honey and boil it down.
yeah. So you can, like if you wanted to make beads, you can just melt a block down or half a block and then sprinkle it on wax paper and then use it like that. It just makes measuring and doesn't get your knife all waxed up. Because dealing with oils and waxes is a messy process. And so if I was going to use essential oils, I would only add them after this is off the burner, because you don't want to heat up the essential oils and quickly lose all that volatile oil smell. Any other questions about like anything?
Yeah, coconut oil, when would you use that?
Oh, that's already in it.
It's already in it.
Yeah.
I thought I heard you mention it. Where is it in it?
There and like
I can see it now.
so like
No, like was it in your infused?
no, I added it yesterday. Yeah. I'm just joking,
I
Leanne.
know, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yes, excellent. There are definite things you should watch out for. Certain plants have contraindications to them. There's a lot of caution if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. The only safe herb throughout is red raspberry leaf. If you're pregnant, the only safe plant to have is red raspberry leaf throughout all of the trimesters. Breastfeeding, you don't want to have anything that's detoxifying because it comes out in the breast milk and like it's too much for your baby. Heart medications, statin medications, there's a slew of possible effects. This is getting too hot now. That's just the water boiling, it's not the oil. Don't freak out. Yeah.
I was just wondering if I could get a sense of your opinion about some of the earlier plants you were talking about, their anti-inflammatory qualities.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could just get kind of a vibe of where you compare the tinctures and such made with those plants compared to something like an over-the-counter ibuprofen.
So some things will work quickly. Some things like not as instant and as anti-inflammatory as an over-the-counter, but safer if you're like, you know, someone that takes Tylenol every day. I would say like try plants because they work in a more restorative way. And so over time, they will like help your body heal itself. So like you're not gonna be like taking the same herbs for life. So herbs are slower acting, but deeper acting. They don't mask symptoms, they like heal the body. So you can see now this is all getting clear. And then the messy part is trying to get all of this into tiny, tiny little tubs. It's going to be quite the show. But I'm going to first pour it into this Pyrex glass because I think that'll be a little bit more manageable. So I'm going to turn that off now.
Did you add the vitamin E?
Not yet. I'm going to take it off the burner. And then you always have to wipe down the bottom so that when you do pour, the water doesn't interfere. You're always thinking about water. So I would never put a lid on that, even if it would speed up the process, because lid over steam makes water. Or, you know, lid over heat makes water. So I might use, I don't know, 6 capsules. That's not really a measurement, but I'm just thinking about it. So I have 6 vitamin E capsules and my pen. And then I just poke the end of the vitamin E and squeeze. You can buy vitamin E in like little tubs shorter than this, but I like that this doesn't have any airspace, so it'll have a longer shelf life. And I don't use enough, like if I were making like products every day, I'd probably buy the bigger vitamin E that you can just like weigh and scoop and stuff, but it wouldn't last. Like it would expire before I ever would finish one of those. I can feel that it's like sticky, so it has a nice texture. It's hard to do this with gloves on. I've never done that before. I was doing a workshop once. We were making sunscreen, and someone didn't get the instruction to pierce the vitamin E, and he just like put it in and then used like the stick blender. It worked. So like if you do have essential oils that you really wanted to add to this when you get home, you could try to mix it in with like a toothpick or something. But the salve will be, oh no, my pen. The salve will be hard already by the time you get home. If it was a glass container, I would say reheat it. But because it's plastic, you don't want to heat up plastic with medicine in it. Or never heat up plastic, but especially when there's medicine in it. Okay. Oh.
And that's not including the staff.
Okay.
And I just counted how many names, because whenever I phoned to come, Naomi said there was 55, and I thought, wow, it's going to be a busy evening for you.
This is a good number.
Yeah.
So, let's see how this goes. Uh-oh. So the interesting thing about making salves,
And we have 34.
34, is if I was doing this for like a commercial purpose, like if I was going to be selling these, I wouldn't fill it all the way to the top because as it cools, it leaves a little bit of like a divot in the center on top, and some customers don't like that. And so I would let it cool a little bit and then come back over it and fill that up. And then it would be a nice smooth surface. Some of these will be a little bit messy. You can see already it's already starting to harden. So then I could like put it back into here or wherever and heat it up again, melt it down. So these, because it has heal all, you can use it on your skin if you have a bug bite, if you have a cut. You can try to use it on like a sore muscle. It's a perfect size for a lip balm.
What about like a rash or something?
Yeah, you can try that too. It's a really safe and effective herb.
Would you use a similar method if you're using something like cacao butter?
It wouldn't harden to the same degree as beeswax.
Right.
So if I was going to make a body butter, then cocoa butter is great, but it wouldn't solidify the same. I mean, it would be nice. It would just have like a softer texture. And it would smell nice too. So I'm just gonna I think I'm making 50. And if anyone has like a friend or family that couldn't be here today, you can take extra. Because there's lots. Look at that. So you can see it starting to solidify. Whoa. But I'm not going to put the cap back on yet, because if it's hot, it'll make steam on the cap and possibly make a moldy environment. Any questions about this process?
Would you have any reservations using like any of these steps on children versus adults?
Not for heal all. For about honey, not for children under 1, whether it's pasteurized or especially unpasteurized. So if there are plants, let's say someone had an allergy to like the daisy family, then you'd have to be mindful about plants in the daisy family and not give it to them. There's a correlation between sumac, cashews, and mangoes. So you have to kind of look at tree families, and if you have allergies in the house, just do some extra research on potential effects of other things that you wouldn't think are related. Okay. They're all coming along nicely.
Yeah, you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
You did a good pouring job.
Oh, thank you. There were a few little...
We couldn't tell. Very quick.
So I'm just adding it back into the hot oil right now. And then I'm going to pour it into another jar and see if it'll fit. But to clean it, first I scrape it with paper towel. You always have to have paper towel around when you're dealing with beeswax and oil. And then soap and water doesn't really do it, so I use rubbing alcohol.
Okay.
And that's a really quick way to take it all off. No, it's a different family. Or do you mean like the bigger plant family? Oh, they're useful for similar things. Plantain is less antiviral. It's antibacterial, but it's used in the same way that you can take a leaf, chew it up, and put it on a cut or a bee sting, and it'll be nice and cooling. Yeah, I'll leave that for now. I don't know if you can see in the back, but it's like almost ready. It's not clear anymore, and the beeswax is hardening. So I'll let that sit for a little bit more, and then I'll put the cap on and you can help yourself. So again, you can use it for any kind of skin irritation, bug bite, bee sting, cut, scrape, lip balm. Hi.
Do you sell any of your tinctures and things that you make?
So I do. So tinctures, I do consults. There's a really big thing right now with the natural health products and Health Canada. If you get too successful and put your stuff on a shelf without a DIN number, they're gonna come after you. So like I can't make Katie's cold and flu herbal remedy and sell it in town without a DIN number, and they want like thousands of dollars for each DIN number. So like cold and flu remedy A, this remedy B would each have to be like thousands of dollars to have their own unique DIN number. But as a herbalist, I can compound and have a consultation. So if we meet or like talk over Zoom, and then like I make a formula specifically to you, that's not like mass producing, and I don't need a DIN number for that. So, but then I do sell some things, like it's kind of seasonal and depending on like craft fairs and whatever, but I have a spiced mint muscle rub that's basically the similar thing as that, but with more herbs specific for muscle pain, and then a lot of essential oils and menthol crystals, which are cooling. So there's cooling and warming things in there. Yeah. Oh yeah, teas. I sell teas. I have 7 medicinal organic teas that the olive tree carries, and I have some of my tea blends also at Rico Refillery in bulk, and then Laurentian Brew Kombucha buy some of my teas from me, and then they turn it into kombucha, which brings out really interesting different flavors. So the Meta Boost, Beautiful Morning, and they've made a Fireside Spice, which is more of a seasonal blend that I've made in the past. Yeah. So when harvesting, like the way that I was taught to harvest again comes from indigenous ways of like harvesting and having connection and relationship with nature and with plants. So indigenous healing traditions understand that energy always moves in a circle, and that's not necessarily just specific to North America, but also like around the world. There's always this idea and the act of giving and receiving and reciprocity. So when you harvest, you don't just like bring your knife and scissors and scale and bags and then just like chop down whatever you see. You kind of put yourself in like a calm and meditative space, and you approach the area with like gratitude and peacefulness and thanks, a very humble state. And then the ask for permission is like you kind of get a sense of like, is this a place I should harvest from today? Should I be harvesting this plant or not? And you sort of can feel like in your gut if it's like feeling right or not. And there's been times where like it just hasn't felt right, or like the plant I wanted was like being seriously pollinated by bees at the time. So I was like, okay, it's not my time. This is like for the bees. And I stepped back. And then you approach, and you kind of like have this like intention to it. Like I want to harvest purple loosestrife to heal my lymphatic system, or so I can like help people. You don't have to like know exactly, but just to help people in general. And I find that it just creates like a nice relationship. And then you offer gratitude, thank the plant, and then you offer tobacco in North America. In the Southwest, it's traditionally cornmeal. And some people even give a strand of hair, something that belongs to them. If you don't have tobacco or doesn't resonate well with you, you give like a strand of hair. Some people give sage, whatever. So you kind of just like get into like a mode of what works with you. What was that? And then once you know your plants, how to sustainably harvest them, how to use them, and contraindications to their use. So that means like if you're on medications and you know the plant is not going to work well for you. The possibilities of creating your own herbal medicine cabinet are endless, and that is not my shelf. Some of you have seen my shelf. I wish. And thank you. That's all I have to say. And I really want to thank the Deep River Public Library for having this here tonight, and the project Not Born from a Virgin Forest, Deep River and Area's Earliest History for making this possible, and of course from the grant from New Horizons for Seniors. And thank you, Britt, for being the one to reach out to me from the beginning and getting this going. Thank you.